Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Howdy Beans podcast. I'm your host, Luke. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good, as per usual. Today, we're going to be looking at the Oscar winning, and it won a incredible, humongous amount of awards last year, but the 2024 Oscar winner movie, Flow. So that's what we'll be looking at today. But before we get into all of that, I want to do a bit of housekeeping because I like to keep my house nice and clean. So make sure that you follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at howdybeans_pod. If you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And finally, if you listen to this on Spotify on your mobile phone, don't forget to leave a 5-star rating. So, as I mentioned, we're going to be looking into Flow. This is the movie's synopsis that comes to us all the way from IMDb. They say, the world seems to be coming to an end. Teeming with the vestiges of a human presence, Cat is a solitary animal, but as its home is devastated by a great flood, he finds refuge on a boat populated by various species, and will have to team up with them despite their differences. In the lonesome boat sailing through mystical overflowed landscapes, they navigate the challenges and dangers of adapting to this new world. And that is the synopsis for Flow. So, for anybody wondering, I do implore you to go check out my review of The Wild Robot. The reason being is not just because it was a fantastic movie and, in my opinion, a pretty good review, but the reason being is the fact of this film, the Flow, and The Wild Robot are linked together. The long and short of it is the fact of one of my most favourite movies from last year was Transformers 1. But it got no love, no recognition, and it failed at the box office, sadly, even though I still believe deeply that it didn't deserve it. And what that meant was the fact that because I was so hung up on that movie, I become sour to the movies that were getting a lot of love and appreciation, which were The Wild Robot and Flow. And it wasn't till the Oscars where Flow won the Oscar for Best Animated Picture, when I kind of sat there and I thought, you know what? There's no need for me to be negative. There's no need for me to judge something, especially how I haven't seen it. I haven't watched it. Everybody's saying it's good. Everybody is raving about how good those movies are, and it won the Oscar. It has, it has to be good. There has to be more to it. There has to be a reason as to why the movies were so successful and so highly loved and acclaimed. So that's what I decided to do. I've looked into The Wild Robot. I absolutely loved and adored the film. I cried my eyes out at the end. I thought it was brilliant, and I understood by the end of that film why it was so loved and why it won so many awards and why it was up there people's favorite movie of the year, because it was generally that good. And it kind of gave me hope coming into Flow, when I was like, look, if The Wild Robot is as good, then people have just got to be right about Flow. I have no doubt about it. So that is kind of the idea behind it. With these two episodes, they're linking together. And I've got my fingers crossed that I really hope that Flow is good. And I think it's brilliant. And I enjoy it. So that is kind of the idea behind it. So again, I do implore you to go back and listen to my review of The Wild Robot if you haven't, because it's a wonderful movie. And then if you have, then we can carry on the review of this one. So as for production, it was a bit difficult to find anything, to be honest, because there's a lot of reports here and there on the movie, but I did manage to find a bit on the animals that were used within the production of the film. So copy bearers and lemurs were studied at zoos such as the Izu Shaiboten Zoo in Japan. The whale was originally supposed to be based on a real whale, but it was redesigned to look more mystical. Additionally, the secret sea bird was originally planned to be a seagull, but was changed because the seagull was too small. The boat used by the main characters was inspired by the Mediterranean Ukaks, which is the type of boat. 7 hours of music was composed by Zilbodis, and 50 minutes of it was used in the film. Sound designer Gerwell Koigalis used actual animal sounds for each characters depicted in the film. Gogalis is a cat named Mitut, served as the voice of the cat. They also felt that the high-pitched and unpleasant sound of an actual capybara being tickled did not properly represent the calm and peaceful capybara in the film. They considered using a moose or llama before they selected the sound of a baby camel instead. The sound of a tiger pitched down was used for the whale, which is actually kind of funny because if you watch the original Jurassic Park movies and you hear the raptors making their noises, all that really is, and I think this is true. I'm about 95% it's true. 5% of me thinks it's might not be true, but I feel like 95% I'm true. Where the noises for the raptors were mating turtles, that they would take turtles while they were mating. They would take the noises, but they would change the octave. They would blow up the octave, so it was a lot more sort of, instead of it was a sort of noise. I'm not going to do noises of turtles mating, but basically that sort of thing. Which they used to kind of use for the raptors. I think that's true. About 95% it's true. I think it is. I don't know. I feel like I heard it on the grapevine somewhere. But the point is, it's not a sort of unnormal to take like animal sounds of another animal and use it for another animal to kind of suit the tone of the movie. Because again, I know it's kind of like, what does the fox say? And foxes make weird noises. Foxes make noises that you wouldn't expect a fox to make, to be honest. But I'm not going to get into it because that's a completely different thing. But you look at a fox and you hear the noise that a fox makes, you're like, that doesn't come out of that animal, but it does. It's more like a human scream. It's terrifying. Anyway, apart from that, there wasn't much more on the production. The movie was made in Blender. There was no storyboards used, and instead, what the creatives did is that they placed the animals into the scene and explored them with the camera. And that's about it, really. Because again, it's still relatively new film, and it's a smaller indie sort of developed film. So I wouldn't imagine there is a lot there for it. But I'm excited. I am. One of the biggest things that got me excited was that We Needed Rose podcast. They have the wonderful Marie on there, and she knows I'm a big fan of her, to be honest. So this will be no surprise if she's listening to this, which I think she will be because she actually loved and adored this movie. But I heard her talk about Flow on that podcast, and she got really emotional about it and was talking about it in such a loving way and such a really sort of emotional way that it sold me. It was one of those where it was just like, yeah, okay, like if this movie can make somebody feel that way, it has to have something to it. It's got to have that thing. I can't really explain it. It's just something that you just know is there when you feel it. And that's was my sort of tipping point. So I do recommend checking out We Need Roads podcast, and then checking out Marie's podcast, Two Girls, One Reusable Cup. Both of them are absolutely brilliant. But it was Marie. So if you listen to this, Marie, thank you. You managed to get this sourpuss. You pushed me over the side and made me really think about properly giving this movie a go and a watch. And not that, I like a silent film. Last silent film I watched was Hundreds of Beavers, and I thought that was absolutely hilarious. So I'm up for a silent movie about animated animals. I'm here for it. A very sort of Noah's Ark sort of situation. Why not? So I'm going to go off anyway and watch Flow. Fingers crossed I enjoy. I have a feeling that I will. And then when I finish, we'll come back and then we'll talk about it. So until then, I'll see you in a minute. And welcome back, everybody. You're going to have to bear with me with this review. Since recording the introduction, I have caught a cold. It's in the early stages. I can feel it, but I might sound a bit nasally. I might sound a bit deeper, and my voice might sound a bit different. I'm all right. I'm all good. I just want to let you know because, again, it might sound completely different. But that's the sort of how podcasting goes. You do the introduction a couple of days ago and a couple of days later, you're not very well. These things happen. But I was well enough to watch and enjoy Flow. And honestly, going straight into it for sort of first impressions, this movie is an exemplar. And I haven't used that word before in the podcast, but it's a perfect time to use it. This film is an exemplar of the craft of cinema. What I mean by that is the fact of if you go back into the history of humanity, we always had a way of expressing ourselves. That's how we sort of differentiated ourselves between us and other animals, was that we created art and we told stories through paintings on walls and things like that. And that's how we told a story. There was no real sound. It was just the fact of, stick figures and a lion, and then that would tell a story of a hunt or something like that. And then as sort of time's gone on, technology's evolved, humans have advanced, we've gotten smarter, a lot more cleverer. You had a lot more vocal stories, and you'd sit around a campfire and you'd tell a story. And then more centuries go by, and we wrote down into books, onto paper and things like that. And then you fast forward even more, and then you get to like sometime in France when like the first sort of silent movies are being made. And it's from that point on is that this storytelling, the way that humans tell stories, have always changed, but the real essence, the purity of storytelling has always basically been the same. And I love that for not just for storytelling, but the fact of that you can still tell a really pure and organic and sort of positive, and I don't know that they had a word then, I lost it, but a very sort of simple story without any sort of voice work at all. You can tell a story, you can tell a narrative, you can convey emotions without having the need of language. And for that, I think it's beautiful, and that's why I think it's an exemplar of cinema, and it's also an exemplar of animation and silent movie, to be honest. And like recently, I watched Hundreds of Beavers. That was a silent film. That was absolutely blown me away and was brilliant, and sort of reignited this joy I have for silent film, because it takes me back to when I was younger. I'd go to my granddad's and we'd watch Lauren and Hardy, and a lot of the original Lauren and Hardy adventures were silent films. And so sometimes you'd have them would say something, then you'd have the caption and stuff like that. And it takes me back to that nostalgia, and the movie reminded me of those days. It reminded me of a lot of things. It reminded me of Above a Bear. It reminded me of like the biblical story of the flood, of Noah and the ark and all the animals 2 by 2. It is a very, very wonderful film, and I can understand. And again, I completely comprehend the idea and concept as to why this movie won the Oscar for Best Animated Film, because it deserves it. It's only a short film. It's only about an hour and 25 minutes. It's not a long movie. But in that hour and 25 minutes, it's able to convey happiness, sadness, a life, adventure, beauty, sadness, destruction. It's able to convey everything without saying anything, all on the hands of the visuals and the music. All in all, in a wonderful package that really, again, exemplars the way of just how humans tell a story and how we have managed to still stay true to our origins of being ourselves and telling a story without any language, of being able to convey emotion just by showing sort of things in motion. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I fell in love with it. I didn't get emotional like I did with Wild Robot. It didn't hit me on the emotional key as I know it did with Marie. I was looking for it, and I can see moments where it would do. I think for me, the only reason it didn't get me on the emotional beats is the fact of I'm not a huge cat person. I'm more of a dog person. And I love animals to bits, but obviously because the lead is a cat, I think that's probably why I couldn't get too emotional to it. But there were some moments when I was like, "Oh, please don't drown," or quickly get on the boat, that sort of thing. And those were those sort of moments, but it never got me emotionally. But that doesn't discount it a bit how good it is. Just because it didn't get me emotionally, it's still a very hard-hitting and emotional sort of adventure epic, really. And again, you might watch it and you might get emotional and you might not, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is the fact of it is a wonderful experience, and it is one that should be experienced. As for sort of the story, there's not really a narrative there. Like there is, but it's not. As I said in the introduction, this movie, they didn't really have storyboards. They tend to just get the characters in a scene and then got them sort of interacting with each other, which actually kind of reminded me of how when I write my sort of stories, how I sort of create characters. I get characters, I put them into a room with each other, and I get them talking. And then from then, getting the idea of how they talk to each other and how each one has personality, I understand which character's who, and then I build from there. And it's kind of the same sort of concept here. And I can notice it when I'm watching the movie as well. I can notice that there's no real narrative. It's mostly just like, oh, we'll do this scene. Oh, this seems like a good scene, and we'll do that scene. We'll do a scene with the lemur and the dog, and the dog basically steals the one of the lemur's sort of collectibles sort of thing, and then the lemur's basically trying to get it back and stuff like that. You know, you get other scenes where you get this whale, like this biblical sort of spiritual sort of whale that keeps popping up, and then you got this other scene where you've got I think it's a heron. I think it's a heron is protecting cat, and I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a very sort of like a sort of brutal sort of moment in it. But again, that tells a story, even without having any language. You know what's going on in that scene. But it's done really, really well, even though. There's no real narrative. You still feel like there's a story being told, that there's some adventure, you know. And this is why I say it reminds me of the biblical text, of this idea of the flood, of that. And I wouldn't even say it's a biblical text, because it is a very human text. It's a very true text. We now know, because of the Youngest Dryas impact and other sort of events that kind of changed the climate, and that there was mass floods, and that all cultures around the world have a flood story. And it kind of reminded me of that, of the idea of like the waters come and they destroy and they take away all that you knew, but they set you up for a fresh, clean new beginning, a new start, really. And that's kind of how it is. Like, you have basically, it starts off with cat's going around and just sort of enjoying the environment, really. Goes down for some water, gets cat. I'm going to call it a she, because I would say it being a feline and being a cat, I'm just going to use the word she because it's a bit easier. But she gets chased by some dogs. She manages to get away. As she gets away, the dogs run back and run past her, and then you've got a whole lot of deer who run back as well, and you can hear rumblings, and all of a sudden this huge wave of water just comes in and sort of takes Cat out. Cat manages to get to safety back to her little home, and like you can see, there's sort of hints of humanity around, but it's kind of like Wild Robot. In fact, there's hints of humanity, but you don't really see humanity. Like, you see humanity in Wild Robot, but you don't see humanity here. You just see the remnants of what was humanity. And again, this reminds me of the flood story as well, which I'll get back to that in a second. And you got these remnants where you got all this big statue on a cliff of a cat that somebody obviously was putting a lot of work into. There's different carvings of cat, which is, again, looks like they took the inspiration from the cat that we follow in the story. And the water's getting up, the water's rising, getting closer. You got these animals that are going on boats. The dogs are going off on their boat. Cat doesn't want to go with them. Ends up finding another boat with a capybara, and that's when the adventure goes. And that's what it feels like the arc is. As it goes through, you meet cat, you meet the dog, you meet capybara, you meet the lemur, you meet the heron, and then you meet all the other dogs as well. And again, it's no dialogue whatsoever, but it's done in such a beautiful way that from the sounds and the facial expressions and the music, you can tell what the characters are thinking, what they're saying to each other. You can tell that, like the lemur, for example, he has a little collection of things that he's hoarded. He's got his own little, you could say, like his own proverbial suitcase of all these little bits of junk that he obviously is his sort of prized possessions. And then you've got the dog messing around with it, and he's like, and he slaps the dog. He's like, oh, give it back, that sort of thing. And I had this inner monologue was in my head. I could hear his voice in my head being like, oh, give it back, that's mine, leave it alone, go away. Or like moments where you've got the cat and the capybara, and the cat's trying to push, and then you've got the capybara basically giving him the look of like, stop, I'm trying to do my job here. And then you get this idea of cat being like, I'm only trying to help, sort of thing. And it's just little moments like that. And again, this is what I love about silent film. This is what I love about animation. This is what I love about this film, is the fact of you can tell all these ideas and concepts and stories without having to actually need a real sort of narrative. And again, like I said, it comes back to the idea of humans and telling stories, and that of just having a couple of characters together and then just seeing where they go and seeing what happens to them. It's very organic, and it's very human, but it's also very pure and wonderful, to be honest. But I love the idea of this flood, of like the water's constantly rising, so the animals have got to basically get on this boat, and then they're just sailing. And as they go through obviously remnants of humanity, remnants of like old ruins that are now being submerged by water, and they get to find this old city that again has been abandoned, but it's still above the water, and they're going through it. And this film is absolutely gorgeous. Like it kind of gets me, the fact of, when I was at university and college, we use Blender. Blender is a free 3D development software that you can use. Anybody can use. You can download it on your computer. But it allows you to make movies and to make models and things like that. And it gets me, the fact of, they were able to make a movie like this, so beautiful and gorgeous and wonderful, in Blender. Back when I was in college and university, I struggled to make a vase. Like one of the topics was like, oh, make a vase, and I could do it, but it was the crappiest vase you ever seen. But I was able to make one, and then been able to put it into my video game that I was making when I was at university. But it was crap. You know what I mean? Like it was terrible. So it kind of gets me, the fact of, I wish I could do this. I wish I was able to use Blender so fluidly like this and be able to make a full-fledged short film as sort of great and beautiful and gorgeous. Like it is. It's jaw-dropping. It's awe-inspiring. I use this saying all the time, but that sort of like every shot is a poster. Every shot is a frame that you can hang on your wall. And it is true with this film. You know, there was one scene that I accidentally paused because my phone went off, and it was a beautiful scene where you've got the ruins of an old city on both sides. You've got this river going through, and at the very edge, you've got these like fingertips sort of like hill, sort of rock formation in the distance. You've got the sun underneath these little finger rocks, and then right in the middle between the sun and the finger rocks is the boat that they're on. It's absolutely beautiful. I wish there was a way that I could take that scene and crop it and then put it like in a frame, because it was just beautiful. It was biblically just gorgeous, you know, and I loved it for that. But this is why, you know, I loved sort of the idea of this flood story, is because it's that idea of, like, there are remnants of life, there are remnants of humanity. You don't see where the humans go. You don't know what happens to the humans. This is a very animal sort of story, very much like the Ark, and how the waters take over the civilization. Again, the Ozymandias sort of idea, like here lies, you know, the world of Ozymandias, and then you look around and it's basically ruins, and you're like, well, this big empire fell. And that's kind of reminded me of the fact that my brain was going here, there, and everywhere, thinking about, what was this, humans, us, or is this like a different sort of humans? Is this in the past? Is this in the future? Is this in the present? Where is it? And again, what happened to everybody? Why is there more animals than people? Were the people already gone by the time the flood came? You know, because it already seemed like nature was taking over these places. And I was trying to pinpoint. I was like, is it China? Is it Japan? Is it is it like the bit like Vietnamese, you know, Indonesia, that sort of side? Because it looks like you go to Nepal at one stage, the Nepalese sort of mountains, and I'm trying to think of my place, like, where are we? What's going on? At the same stage, I'm thinking, you know, what's going on with the characters, where they're going, is like, where is the sort of river leading them? What is the ending sort of point? And yeah, again, my mind was going crazy, and I loved it. I love that moment of just trying to figure out, of like, you know, you got that sad story of these human remains that have just been taken over by the water, and that the animals are able to survive, but humanity, the remnants of us, haven't. And that at the end of the movie, when the water starts to recede and it goes back, and it can walk around on the land again, the earth starts to open up and the water starts to spill in, and then the sort of land masses start to part a bit. And it's that idea of like, this is probably what happened back during these obviously flood stories, is the fact, if you have these old civilizations that were around, the flood came, wiped it out, then the water receded, and then life started again. And again, I'm not going to get into sort of the flood stories too much, because that's a completely different sort of review and episode. But I love that idea and that concept, and how it was the animals were trying to survive. And at the end of it, you have these animals that really shouldn't be friends. You've got a cat, a capybara, a lemur, and a heron, and a dog. They shouldn't be friends. They shouldn't like each other. But because of what they've been through, they have a kinship with each other. They're together. And there was a moment with the heron, which, I'll be honest, reminded me of the ending of Brother Bear. but I couldn't really explain as to why. It was a very beautiful scene, but again, I couldn't understand as to what it meant. So maybe I'd have to watch the movie again to really get it. But at the end of the film, where you've got these characters together and they're looking into a pool and they're looking at themselves, and while the camera's panned down and they're looking at themselves in this little puddle, and it's reflected back to them, they're moving in closer, and you can tell that because they've been through something, that they are sort of friends for life, that they are sort of together, and it's lovely. It's a lovely picture, but also it comes back to the fact of the wild robot. In the wild robot, there is a moment where there's a big storm that hits, and all the animals have to come into this little sort of house that the robot has built, and they all sort of make a pact, be like, while we're in here, we don't kill each other, we don't fight each other. This is a peaceful ground, this is where we come to survive. So while we're in here, we won't harm anybody. It's a very beautiful scene, and it kind of reminded me again, like what we have here is the fact of, you have this moment where they shouldn't like each other, they should be enemies. Like the cat should be running away from the dog, the capybara, again, nothing. Well, nothing really is scared of the capybara, really, and the capybara is not scared of anything either. So but the lemur should be with the lemur, and they shouldn't work, but it does, and it's a beautiful thing of going on an adventure, of going through adversity, going through struggle, going through it with other people, and having that same experience and having that kinship. And it's absolutely, it's wonderful, really, really is. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was beautiful, it was gorgeous, it's an exemplar of the craft, and my overall thoughts is, I can understand as to why this film won the Oscar for Best Animated Picture, because it is a pure example of what you can do in animation. And it also goes to show as well that you don't need millions and millions and millions of dollars to make a movie. You really don't anymore. It used to be, back in the day, with the way Hollywood was in cinema, you needed loads of money, you needed tons of people. But nowadays, the way that you've got these loads of free software like Blender, and what you've seen with this movie, what you can do with a free open source piece of software, as well as how good phones are now. I think they filmed, is it the new Mission Impossible on an iPhone? I think it's the new Mission Impossible, but basically, they cameras on phones are getting so good now, and it's getting a lot cheaper and a lot more sort of open source. People can do these things now, that it goes to show that you don't need millions and millions of dollars to make a huge movie. You can make a very incredible, impactful, unique story with nearly hardly next to free to nothing, and it's quite inspiring. And to see that this movie won the Oscar, hopefully then propels other creatives, other animators, other filmmakers to go, you know what, I've got a vision, I've got a story in my mind that I never knew I'd be able to tell, and I was always worried that I would never be able to. But now, because Flow was so successful and it won the Oscar, I'm going to sit down and learn to use Blender. I'm going to sit down how to edit. I'm going to learn how to use the camera. I'm going to get my friends together. Again, like Hundreds of Beavers, I'm going to get my friends together, and we're just going to go out into the wilderness, and we're going to make a movie, and it's going to be funny. And Hundreds of Beavers made $1 million at the box office, and that film was made for 150,000, which again is a lot of money, but still, it's made its money back tenfold. This film wasn't made for that much. Actually, if I Google it right now, if I have a look how much Flow was made for. So Flow was made for 3.5 million, which is again a lot of money. But when you realise that a lot of that money was actually supplied by film organisations and governments and councils and things like that, then it goes to show. But my point still stands, is the fact of, you don't need a lot of money to make a beautiful movie. You've just got to have an idea. That's all it is. Just an idea, just a concept, and go out and film it. That is the best thing you can do. Get your phone, get a camera, whatever. Don't spend a lot of money and do it. And for that, I think it's absolutely beautiful. And I can't wait to see what more sort of indie sort of animated films or movies that we're going to see this year in 2025, what we're going to see in the years to come. If they can do this with a free piece of software like Blender, and it win the Oscar, who knows what can come next? Who knows what will happen next in this genre and in cinema? So it's got me hopeful. It really, really has, and I'm glad. I'm glad I sat and decided not to be sour and decided to go back and to watch The Wild Robot and to watch Flow, because now I can understand. I now I can relate. I can get why people like these movies so much and why these movies were so successful and why they got so much acclaim and so many awards. Granted, I still feel like Transformers deserves some of that love too, but I can also understand and relate to other people's feelings now, and I get it. And also, it's got me thinking the fact of maybe I shouldn't be sour in the future. Maybe if I watch a movie and I love it, but it doesn't do very well, I shouldn't then put other movies down personally. I shouldn't be like, oh, I don't want to watch them because my film was successful. Like, no, you know what? I've learnt my lesson now. I'm not going to do that for the future. So it's been a wonderful experience for me. And I hope for you all listening at home, it's been a wonderful experience as well, listening to The Wild Robot and to my thoughts on Flow. So, yeah, thank you very much for listening. Let me know if you've seen this movie. If you have, again, put it down in the comments either on Spotify or YouTube. I want to know what people think. I want to know what people thought of The Wild Robot, thought of Flow, thought about me not being a much of a sourpuss and deciding to finally give these movies a go. Anything and anything, really. I want to sort of hear off you. Also, again, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe and all that jazz. Give a 5-star rating. Follow me on Spotify. You know how it is now. And yeah, thank you very much for listening to my review of Flow. You've been listening to the Howdy Beans podcast. I've been your host, Luke the Human, and I will catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye, guys.